Hello everyone, I'm bringing you another video from Hack Green today. We're at another of the Cold War Living History events here. This is the autumn event, but as you can see, it's blazing sunshine. It's very hot in the UK at the moment, so it's quite fortuitous that we chose to put on a display of Gulf War kit this weekend. It was very much the tail end of the Cold War, and as many people see, at the end of the Cold War, of course, with the Soviet agreement to the deployments to the Gulf, and obviously former Warsaw Pact forces involved as part of the coalition as well. So quite interesting from that point of view, and we've had a lot of interested people come round and have a look so far. What I'm going to do in this video, of course, is show you some of the other displays. In particular, we have a Viet Cong NVA display we're going to have a look at, and also some Italian kit as well, courtesy of Walter, who's appeared in these videos previously. So without further ado, we'll get into the main part of the video now and have a look at these displays. So we're here with Walter, who you'll have seen previously videos covering Hack Green. He's talked through some of his kit in the past, doing something slightly different here with the Italian Cold War era kit. So take it away, Walter.
Hello, I'm wearing the uniform of the Bersaglieri, who were, probably pronounced that wrong, I don't speak Italian, who were a unit initially formed as sharpshooters and later became mechanised infantry. Distinguished obviously by this plume of feathers on the right side of the helmet, which is a traditional element of their uniform that they still wear to this day on the modern Kevlar helmets. The white helmet is portraying the peacekeepers in Lebanon, who were deployed in the 1980s due to increasing violence there. The uniform is an olive green Model 75 uniform. You've got two chest pockets, two waist pockets. You've got nice padded knee pads, which are quite comfortable when you're travelling around. The boots aren't Italian, but they're relatively close, so I'm getting away with them at the moment. You've also got nice pads on the shoulders, epaulets, Velcro for name, so on and so forth. The webbing that the Italians used in the Cold War was essentially a straight copy of British 37 pattern. The belt is almost identical, but the collar is a bit darker and the weave is a bit tighter on the fabric. The scabbards are American M8 style scabbards, but this is a bayonet for the BM-59. So, this rifle is the Italian Fucile Automatico Leggero Beretta Modello 59, or BM-59, known in Italian as a FAL, for light automatic rifle. Of course, in English, FAL tends to refer to the FN. These were made as a conversion of World War II M1 Garand rifles. Obviously, you add a new muzzle brake flash hider recoil compensator that also serves as a 22mm grenade spigot, fold-up grenade sight for Energa grenades that locks off the gas system. You've got a bipod, 20-round box magazine, and selector here so you can fire in fully and semi-automatic. They also added a rubber butt pad for comfort, and there's a trapdoor in there here for cleaning kit. There's the pull through, the oil is stuck on this one. You get the idea. This one is actually made on a 1942 or 43 Springfield receiver, as well as this Beretta manufactured new receivers from scratch starting in the 1960s. Operation is pretty much the same as a Garand. The clip release was repurposed as a bolt hold open. The magazine is detachable, but you tend to see these being fitted, being loaded from strip clips, because they added a clip guide on the top and then refinished the whole rifles when they made them. This is the one that was used by the Bersaglieri. It's a standard infantry model with a fixed wooden stock. You also had two other variants. The TA for Truppe Alpine, which is what this is, mountain troops version for the Alpini, and also the PC for parachutisti, for parachutists. The difference between the two is the parachutist one has a removable flash hider. The main difference, of course, is you have a folding stock at the back, which gets out of the way. That gets more comfortable for climbing around in the mountains, and then if you take the flash hider off, the rifle is short enough to fit through the door of the plane when you're jumping out. Also, of course, fixed pistol grip there rather than the rifle grip on the normal one. Otherwise, same system. This is also a converted Springfield receiver. I'm trying to get an Italian one, I found one yet. Other weapons we have down here are the Beretta Model 4 submachine gun. This is a post-war variant of the MAB 38, widely regarded as one of the best submachine guns of the war. Feeds from these long 40 round, actually that one's marked as a 30, some of them are marked 30, some of them are marked 40, but they're the same length. 40 round magazine, fires 9x19 Parabellum, but they made a more powerful version of 9mm for the submachine gun that was used in pistols. Distinctively, it ejects from the left and cocks on the right. This one's deactivated, the bolt won't lock back. You have a push button safety here, which was an addition on the Model 4. one with a short barrel and a recoil compensator at the front. This, as I say, was a World War II design. It was replaced in the 1960s with this, the Model 12, a very compact, nice, handy little design. You've got safety switch there, and selector switch here for Graphica, meaning fully automatic and singular for single shot. You have the grip safety there. If you don't squeeze that, the bolt won't move. The bolt doesn't actually move on this one because it's deactivated, and it locks the trigger as well. Uses the same magazines as the Model 4 and the MAB. Sights on the top, all pretty standard stuff, but a very compact platform to move the action backwards relative to the Model 4. Another piece of equipment I've got here is the helmet. This is the Italian M33 helmet, same design as was used during the war. They changed the colour to a sort of more greener shade of olive. This one's actually a refurbished one, which has square chin strap bales. The white helmet was used by the Italians on UN peacekeeping duty. They didn't use the more typical blue UN helmets for reasons unknown to me. So on the ground here we have an Italian 37 pattern pouch. These were made post-war. Dimensions are identical to a British 37 pattern basic pouch, but you have a leather strap rather than the British style brass fasteners. These you see used into the 1980s, mixed with British and Canadian supplied true 37 pattern, same with the belts. The fabric's also very slightly different. This is standard Italian Army rucksack. Square shape, contains a reasonable amount of stuff, and you've got pockets on the side for rifle grenades. There we have a shirt and a pair of trousers from the Italian dress uniform, called the drop uniform. A gas mask bag there for Model 49 gas mask, which I sadly don't have. Then at the back we have another piece of traditional headgear of the Bersaglieri, the fez. If they're not wearing the helmet, then this is what you see them wearing. Blue tassel on it, made of red felt. Worn not on the top of the head like a stereotypical fez, but on the back of the head, dragged backwards. Here I have the stuff I'm going to be wearing tomorrow, which is the uniform of the Italian Tuscania parachutist unit, who were originally formed as airborne riot troops and later became essentially heavy infantry. Sorry, light infantry. They were a branch of the Carabinieri, who are part of the Italian armed forces but serve as a police and military police force within Italy and abroad. And the Tuscania were their paratroops. They have this cap badge with the Carabinieri gendarmerie style flaming bomb with a red airborne beret. They have a distinctive uniform which differs from the more common Italian camouflage uniforms. You've got padded shoulders, padded elbows. The pocket flaps are a single piece of fabric with a button rather than being separate pockets stitched onto the outside. The trousers are similar. They have no braces, worn with a belt, and have padding on the knees as well for comfort. As well as the berets, Italian paras also traditionally wore these Portuguese style caps, copied from the Portuguese forces in operating in Africa. The standard model camouflage uniform, which I did have one of somewhere, I can't remember where I put it, has a detachable hood that also serves as helmet cover. I think that's everything. Oh, other thing here, this is a later piece of kit that you see starting to show up in Lebanon in the 1980s. It's a canteen, obviously, with Alice style clips instead of the 37 pattern ones. I think that's everything that I've got out at the moment.
Thank you very much indeed, Walter, much appreciated. Thank you.
Hi guys, due to a slight glitch with the camera, I unfortunately lost the beginning of Matt's spiel about his display. So we enter here a little way in talking about Viet Cong kit. I don't think much is lost here, but unfortunately the beginning of his talk about his kit is lost. But this is Matt, and thank you very much, Matt, for talking through your display.
So we've got a canteen, and this bandolier here is a rice carrier, and that was really the only sustenance the Viet Cong would carry in the field. Normally they wouldn't be far from a home village, but if they were, they would carry an amount of rice, some water, and then they would sort of hunt, scavenge, or trade, or occasionally liberate supplies of food from the locals to sustain themselves on campaign. If we turn the mannequin around, the hats, we've got a boonie hat here. That is the most commonly worn headgear in the Viet Cong War. We will see something in a second that I want to just talk about, which is the famous conical hat, the non-lap palm leaf hat. A lot of American films have you believe they wore these all the time. That wasn't the case because it's a completely useless helmet for combat. No line and no harness, it doesn't sit very well on your head if you're moving. It was worn for travelling or when disguising themselves as civilians. Otherwise, absolutely not seen in combat. It had been discarded for being a hindrance more than anything else. The backpack here is a simple, fairly light cloth 3-cell design. It holds just about anything else the fighter would need. Not always seen, but on longer marches, particularly for main force who moved around areas within South Vietnam, you would see the backpacks. Completing the outfit, we've got under the hats, we have a scarf. It's I think the pronunciation is Canran. It's a checkered scarf that was used by the Viet Cong for identification. Again, would likely have been discarded when they were trying to hide. The sandals are the Zetlok rubber tyre sandals, made from car tyres normally, and inner tubes. And the weapon here is a Tokarev pistol. It's carried on this piece of cord in lieu of a holster. And what would normally be done is the fighter would just pull the barrel out of the loop at the end and then be ready to fire, and off you go. So that's Viet Cong. The weapons, we've got a machete there. Machetes were made, had been made locally for hundreds of years. They were sometimes during the Vietnam War cut from aircraft aluminium and assembled with wooden scales in village workshops. They were fairly common, they were useful for travelling through the jungle. We've also got an M1 carbine, which were captured from the Americans, the ARVN, or were picked up after being left over by the French after the end of the Indochina War. An SKS, which were given to them by the Chinese in huge quantities, but were not as popular as the AK, which they also used in slightly less quantity. The PPSH is normally a Chinese Type 50 version. It's the same thing, has slightly different sights, and again was imported by the Chinese communists. Was used with both the types of stick mag, which are 35 round, or the drum, which is technically 71 round. We have pouches for all these weapons. Well, the PPSH pouch is here, and the SKS pouch is over there, the chest rig. At the bottom there is a POMZ trip mine, which would have been commonly used to trap jungle trails and other closed areas. We set them off. We also have an M79, a bunker. Again, like the M1, normally captured in huge quantities from the Americans in particular, or the South Vietnamese. They actually remain in North Vietnam's, what is now Vietnam's armoury to this day, and are very, very popular with their army. On the table here, just get one, we have, this is a replica of what's known as a toe popper mine. These were inert or spent 50 caliber casings that were reset with a primer, filled with powder and capped off with wax, set into a tube of bamboo with a pin at the bottom, and these would be installed in a trail in the ground. And somebody walked along, stepped on the end of the cartridge, pressed it on the pin, it'd fire, and as the name implies, it popped the toes off. It'd make a mess, it'd cause horrible injuries, life-changing injuries, and it would tie up resources for the rest of the squad while they tried to evacuate. We've also got a replica set of punji stakes there. You'll notice it's set into two halves. The idea of that is it's set into a hole, and you would put your foot into the hole and tread on the middle part with no spikes, and there'd be a hole underneath that, and it would cause the outer edges to lever up and impale your lower leg, your calf, with the spikes. Usually made out of sharpened twigs or branches, as here, bits of sharpened bamboo, or sometimes nails that were sharpened and hooked round.
And that's interesting, it gets around the spike protection in the boots.
Absolutely, yeah, totally. It wouldn't go through the bottom of the foot, but you could damage the leg and cause just as nasty injuries anyway. So, moving further round, on the ground here we have the RPG-2, which was made by the Vietnamese as the B-40, or imported by the Chinese as the Type 56. To confuse things, behind that we have the Type 56 machine gun, which is a Chinese copy of the RPD, the Soviet RPD, was the main support weapon for the PAVN. Sometimes saw use with the VC, was not as popular because it was big, it's heavy, it's hard to hide once they're trying to fade back into civilian life. Good gun, wasn't particularly useful for extreme extended firefights because you can't change the barrel, it's not got a quick change barrel. So if the barrel got hot, you'd have to wait for it to cool. Behind that we have a selection of sort of everyday items. On the left we have a little comb made out of aircraft aluminium, popular souvenirs from Vietnam. A lot of the Vietnamese guys would buy them as sort of morale boosters. A captured sea ration tin, peanut butter. The Viet Cong in particular captured a lot of sea rations to sort of supplement their own food. The little parcels in leaves there are a traditional way in a lot of Southeast Asian countries of transporting food. You have a ball of rice, part cooked and sort of bundled together, and then wrapped in the banana leaves, tied with rattan or twine, and then they can be carried like that. They will stay like that, and when you need to cook them, all you do is you drop the entire package into boiling water. It boils, you unfurl the leaves, and you can just eat it off the leaves. So you've got really sort of quick and easy transport and eating service there. Also got a Soviet supplied mess tin. The can on the left is an old French condensed milk tin, which the Viet Cong would use to cook food or transport it. The lid is quite tight, so it makes quite a nice seal. An enamel cup, imported mostly from China, with a patriotic slogan on it. Again, morale boosters for the troops. Moving along, we have some first aid kits, a couple of field dressings in wraps there. They're Chinese made, Chinese supplied. Behind that, the first aid kit is Soviet supplied and is very well stocked. In front is a Vietnamese made one, which is just a simple satchel with ties to hold the lid shut. And the small pouch is a belt mounted bandage pouch, which usually holds about 4 of those individually wrapped bandages, smaller ones. We also have canteen behind the RPD, and a few behind on the board there. I'm not sure whether you can see them very well with the reflections. Chinese made propaganda in support of Vietnam. It's quite funny how much the Chinese threw the weight behind the Vietnamese struggle only a few years after the war to have their own war with them. quite a turn of events. So moving further down,
And it's interesting, they suffered a lot of the same problems the US
absolutely,
had done.
yeah, they reacted in much the same way and got in the same sort of trouble. Learned very little. So we have a selection of grenades. The Viet Cong in particular would use just about any grenade they could get their hands on, including improvised homemade designs. The grenade on the left is a M9 rifle grenade. The Chinese, mostly Chinese copies of those. At the end of the Chinese Civil War, towards the end of the Chinese Civil War, the Chinese nationalists were supplied by the Americans in large quantities, and they received rifle grenade launchers and rifle grenades. After the Civil War ended, the Chinese communists copied those and produced them in some quantities for years, which were passed on to the Viet Cong as light anti-armour weapons, support weapons. Got a Soviet F1, a M2 grenade, which was still the standard American grenade at the start of the war because there was just so many of them left over from the Second World War in Korea. An M26, an RGD-5, which appeared from Soviet supply later on in the war, a Vietnamese-made stick grenade, which is an old F1 casing on a stick, and a Chinese Type 67 grenade, again on a stick. That was the standard Chinese grenade. The Vietnamese also got quite large quantities of. We have the radio there, is a Type 884, Chinese-made, introduced later on in the war, and it was introduced to the Vietnamese by the Chinese before the Chinese got it, so it could be field tested.
Interesting.
Yeah. It is quite an unusual one, that, especially since it was late in the war and the Chinese opinion was starting to shift against Vietnam. The red scarf there is more commonly worn by Cambodians. There were Cambodian fighters in the Viet Cong. There was a crossover of ideologies, and volunteers came from there. The rifle is the Mosin Nagant. It's Type 53, the Chinese copy of the Soviet M44 Mosin Nagant, with its little chest rig. That's an early one with the knot ties rather than the little wooden toggles. 5-round stripper clip, feeds 7.62x54 rimmed, and that would have been carried by the mannequin that's dressed there, who is dressed as a member of the North Vietnamese militia, whose abbreviation is DQTV. And they were responsible for guarding the North Vietnamese homeland during the war, enforcing blackouts, controlling traffic, keeping watch for infiltrators, operating light anti-air weapons, and generally just acting as a security force. And that is more or less the display. There's quite a lot of it, I know.
Very interesting though. The flag in the foreground here,
Sure.
It tells a little bit about that as well.
That's the flag of Vietnam as it is today, and would have been a North Vietnamese army battle flag.
Yes.
The Viet Cong very often made flags of a similar size with the distinctive half blue, half red, and the star. And they were used as battle flags, as like morale boosters. You see pennants and even little flags from bugles in those colours. The Viet Cong what the Vietnamese know as the National Liberation Front were dissolved at the end of the war, as well as the provisional government they had established. They weren't just guerrillas, they had their own provisional government, which was dissolved at the end of the war by the North Vietnamese authorities as Vietnam was unified.
Yes, there's a bit of a contention there as well, in that the fighters in the south were really didn't get the best deal at the end of it all
quite
either.
badly done by, after all the struggle they'd done. You know, not many of the fighters were left, but the politicians were not particularly well taken care of by the new
regime.
Regime. So yeah, that's everything, I think.
Superb, thank you very much. And for anyone who's interested, Matt has appeared previously on my secondary channel, RM Military Miscellany, talking about this kit in a bit more detail, particularly the kit on the mannequins, and you talked through the MVA kit as well as well. Worth going and having a look at if you're interested in this sort of kit. Recommending my own channel there, but if you're interested in this sort of kit, as I say, it's Matt specifically talking about the uniform and equipment and so forth, so recommend going and have a look at those if you find this sort of thing interesting. So this is our Gulf War display here. Most of the kit belongs to group member Craig, who I've mentioned previously in previous videos on the channel. So we have my set of equipment and SLR here, and combat body armour, and then Craig's SA-80, deactivated example, which is very nice. So with some desert paint on the foregrip and the pistol grip there, as you can see. And then we'll have a look in here at the details of the display, which obviously was set up underneath this cam net to give a bit of shade, and also to add something to display as well. So various mannequins showing various combinations of kit from the Gulf. See here, all tagged up, which is useful for the public in seeing what's on display. We'll just have a quick pan round here and have a look at everything. The elusive sand woolly pulley, Jersey heavy wool, so with officer's rank and the PLCE shoulder holster there. Various sets of equipment and so forth around on display. Operational maps. A bit of a glare off there in my reflection, so hopefully you can see what's going on there. The sun's in the wrong direction really, and has been all day for filming that particular part, but never mind. More sets of equipment and so forth on the mannequins here. Different boots, so we've got desert boots on the left there, and then a pair of blackened jungle boots which came from a Gulf War veteran. And the respirator haversack in the middle there, and obviously the MBC boots on the right here, which have been packed out with a pair of boots to give an idea of what they look like when they're worn. Obviously lightweight combat body armour at the back there. Got the vest in here, we'll have a look at this. So you've got the, see there, covert operations vest. Quite a nice bit of kit. So Craig's just very kindly opened up the display cabinet so I can show you the contents of this without the glare of the sun. So you've got the S10 respirator there, and obviously various parts of the MBC equipment and combo pen and so forth there, as you can see. Vapor detector, which is something we looked at previously. A desert scrim scarf, obviously angle head torch there. Various other bits and pieces at the back here. First aid kits, the Sandy Times, as you can see there. And something which arrived today, Craig purchased off a chap who come to chat to him, is this voodoo doll of Saddam Hussein, which is typical of some of the sort of souvenirs, I guess you could say, that were around at the time. A little bit distasteful perhaps, but interesting nonetheless. And then desert toilet paper at the back there. And that's the contents of the display cabinet here, as you can see. I just pan across the front here again, so you can see what we have in there. Rank wristlet down here as well, as you can see in the bottom right corner here. And then another set of equipment here, obviously the PLC with the vehicle paint to camouflage that, make that a bit of sand camouflage. And then further pairs of boots there, a couple of pairs of the RAF desert boots, as you can see there. And then some captured Iraqi items, again these are from veterans of the Gulf, and bringbacks, see those there. And we have some of the t-shirts, the unit t-shirts, which were worn, an interesting one here. See that there? Another one of those over here. And then we have another set of equipment here with the US Parker, which were used in some instances, obviously, sort of bartered and traded, and quite common to see in photographs. And then a display board here detailing Operation Granby and photographs and so forth of operations in the desert, as you can see there. And again, it's not too bad looking at these in person, but I think the dappled light from the cam net may make it a little bit difficult in the video, so please bear with that. That's the display here. So the final thing to talk about here is the kit I'm wearing, obviously as part of our display. And what we have here is based on the kit of sappers of the Royal Engineers serving in the Gulf in late 1990, early 91 in training. And it's referenced directly from photographs of the time. So I'll run through this kit briefly. It is something that's been covered on the channel previously, but for completeness' sake, as part of this video, I'll run through it again. So starting at the top, of course, we have the Mark VI ballistic nylon helmet with Desert DPM cover. The basic combat uniform is the lightweight combat uniform in Desert DPM cotton, of course. Over that we have the body armour worn here, as you can see, and over the top of that we have the web equipment, which is the 1958 pattern in this instance. You can see the two ammunition pouches here, and we'll have a look at the other pouches and so forth in just a minute. I'll start turning around and showing you the various other details. And then footwear consists of Boots Combat High, and in this instance these are the first pattern. Of course it would be very common to see second pattern Boots Combat High in use at this time as well. The weapon carried is of course the L1A1 self-loading rifle, which you can see here, the nylon sling fitted there. Basically still the most common weapon amongst supporting troops in the Gulf. The L85 had primarily been issued to infantry, and Royal Engineers, Royal Artillery, Royal Logistics Corps and so forth had the SLR and the SMG and so forth, generally speaking, as opposed to the L85, so we have the SLR there. Moving around to look at this side of the equipment here, you can see we have water bottle pouches around on the belt here, and as we move around here you can see they're all around the rear of the belt as well, replacing the rear pouches. Relatively common to see in photographs at the time, although you do see the rear pouches, the kidney pouches, still in use as well to some degree. Above that we have the Cape Carrier, or poncho roll as it's colloquially known, and in this we have a Mark IV NBC suit. This is in the temperate DPM finish, so green, brown, tan and black DPM. The supply of Desert DPM NBC suits was very limited, so many troops had to make do with these, including during the actual assault into Iraq and then into Kuwait as well. So these were used. Desert DPM NBC suits were in very short supply. And on top of this you can see we have a pair of NBC boots which have been attached in place with bungees, simply hooked together. Very common to see, very common way of carrying the NBC suit and boots on the back of the 1958 pattern equipment. Certainly very common, a very common way to see this done in photographs of the time. Round on the left hip here we have the respirator haversack, and this of course is the older nylon pattern of respirator haversack, not part of the 1958 pattern equipment but associated with it. Generally speaking, those troops who'd received the new PLCE, personal load carrying equipment, would have been provided with the nylon haversack, which is part of that equipment, but in this case we have the earlier pattern of haversack, but this would have contained the S10 respirator, the decontamination kit and various other elements of the NBC gear. Obviously you'd have your combo pens in there and gloves, both inner and outer as well, for wear with the NBC suit. So that's carried around on the hip here. Of course, important to note that it's carried separately on its own shoulder strap, so if I were to remove the web equipment, this would stay with me, which is very important in the Gulf. There was a very real threat, or a very real perceived threat of chemical attack in the Gulf. One thing I didn't mention is the dressing taped up onto the yoke of the web equipment here. This is a small joint services dressing, and it's quite common to see dressings taped up onto the web equipment like this, either a large or a small joint services dressing taped up like this. So that's the equipment, the uniform I have here basically. I think that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. Obviously, hopefully it's been interesting looking at the different displays here. Obviously, hopefully we'll be back in the spring and there'll be another video covering what's on display then. And as I say, I do hope you found it interesting. If you have and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as I always say, a massive thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there as well. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.